Let's get into it.
I'm just speculating, homie. I'm just speculating. I'm just speculating, homie. I'm just speculating. I'm just speculating, homie. I'm just speculating.
Hey everybody, come on, checking out another episode of us talking about Star Trek Discovery. So there's a couple of plot threads happening around. I guess the cosmos that Star Trek Discovery is just kind of letting sit out there for a little while, and they haven't really rounded them all off yet. So I think some of us are tracking on a few of them, but I'm here to try to pull some of those ideas and theories together to start off this really cool speculation of what the plot might be for the rest of Season 2, possibly going into Season 3, if they have one, because, you know, they haven't officially been renewed yet, and I will point that out. So the first thing I want to talk about is this image here, which shows off the technology that the Ba'ul were using in the previous Discovery episode. It looks eerily similar to that of the obelisk that was shown in the TOS episode, The Paradise Syndrome. This was an obelisk used, I think it was literally, they called it like the asteroid avoider or something. It was designed to block asteroids from hitting a planet. The preservers moved an alien species there. They were like Native Americans or whatever. And they moved them to this planet. They built this obelisk, and then they said, okay, they'll be safe there. And then the obelisk, of course, doesn't work right. There's a whole episode there. So the conversations happening right now are the preservers possibly connected back to the Ba'ul? Was this just an Easter egg as kind of like just an homage to this cool-looking design that they had in TOS? Or is it a bit more than that? My personal theory right now operating is I think that the Ba'ul came across some preserver technology that was on Kaminar, because if you remember from the episode, they were right on the cusp of being eliminated from the cosmos, being exterminated by angry, mature Kelpians that had lost their ganglia. So I think it's fair to say that the Ba'ul may have come across this technology, mastered it, and then used that to beat back the Kelpians and essentially establish a whole new world order. So there's that thing is there. So let's leave it where it is. The next thing I want to talk about is the short trek episode Calypso. Now, not a lot of people watch the short treks. I watched all of them, and some of them were good. Calypso was one of the things that was disappointing to me because there was so much potential for it to be really good, but they kind of wasted the story. But the key things that happened in there were, number one, the main character, Kraft, was on board a Vaharish escape pod, I guess you could say, from one of their ships. And inside of this alien escape pod, Kraft is a human, but inside this alien escape pod, there was an episode, I believe it was of Betty Boop, playing on loop for hours and hours and hours or weeks or however long he was inside the pod for. So the Kraft guy lands and interacts with the USS Discovery, which it turns out has been sitting in the same location for over 1,000 years. And they don't explain why the Discovery is there. They don't explain what happened to the crew of the Discovery, only that the captain of the Discovery, and they don't reveal who that is, told the ship that it needs to stay in this specific location for, it didn't say exactly how long, but it has to stay there, and it cannot leave. So there's that piece going on. There's something that happened 1,000 years in the future that we're not aware of, sometime in the 33rd century, sometime in the year roughly that they're guesstimating around the 3300 time period, which is the furthest out that we've ever been in Star Trek. Something happened where I don't know if it's the Federation's gone or what's happening, but humans are engaged in at least a 10-year-long war with the Varish or however you pronounce it. And this guy is a soldier in that war, and then he was on one of the alien escape pods that was stuck playing a episode of Betty Boop on repeat, that from a period that he called the long ago, the long time ago. I think it's actually called the Vidarish. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. It's not important. So anyway, so we have that theory going on as well. And that episode has not been touched again. No one's really talking about that episode from the production of Star Trek Discovery. It's just kind of hanging out there. The Discovery is sitting out in some place in space for 1,000 years, and there is a war going on with an alien species that seems to have a weird obsession with old school Earth cartoons. So that's also hanging out there. So that's hanging out. Let's leave that over there. The other theory that I want to talk about was something that I came across on Facebook that I didn't write myself. It was part of one of the Discovery fan groups on Facebook that I'm a part of, and I want to go ahead and read what this person has put forward as a theory in mind, and then I'm going to try to see if we can't possibly connect some of these ideas and maybe theorize and speculate about where this particular plot of Star Trek Discovery is headed. So I'm going to bring it up so that I can kind of read it, not word for word, but get the full explanation here. I'm not going to commit it all to memory. So it says, this was posted by user Michael Karan, who is an admin of this particular Star Trek group. It says, Red Angel has already changed the timeline. When Spock was a kid, the Angel showed up to tell Sarek where to find Michael, which is, not exactly accurate. So in the original timeline, Michael died after only living with the Spock's family for a year or two. This is why Michael is never talked about in the original series, because Spock only knew her for a short time, and perhaps he wouldn't want to talk about the loss of his sister that his stepsister or whatever, you want to call her, that happened many years ago. So because Michael isn't there was never a war with the Klingons, and Georgiou never died. The tardigrade likely killed Stamets on the USS Glenn. The next one is the Spore Tech never went any further because those people had died. Mira Lorca never gets back to the Mirror Universe. Mira Georgiou stays in the Mirrorverse, and Mira Stamets is stuck forever inside the network inside the Mirror Universe. Reno's medical ship never gets attacked and crashes on the asteroid. Pike never goes to the Discovery. Hugh never gets killed. The big living database alien thing never gets to give its data to anyone, and all that history is lost because it gave it to the Discovery in Season 2. And so now Michael is alive, and everything we see was never meant to happen. So this is an interesting theory. So essentially, is it saying is the angel that we know have, the furthest back that the angel that we know have has gone back is during World War II, and it saved a group of soldiers and civilians inside of a church and transported them onto New Eden, or not New Eden, but the episode New Eden or whatever the hell it was called. And then the next thing we know is that the Red Angel was appearing to Spock and told Spock where to find Burnham after the attack that occurred that we saw in Season 1 by the Vulcan extremists. So it is assumed that this red alien is affecting the timeline, and if Michael had died, almost all of the events that we have seen so far depicted in Season 1 and Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery would not have occurred. The mycelial network, the spore drive would have all been mothballed because there would have been a pressure to do it because there would have been no war with the Klingons because Michael wouldn't have killed T'Kuvma. She wouldn't have been there. That whole event would have played out differently. The spore drive would have been mothballed also because of the fact that everyone died on the USS Glenn, and Stamets would have most likely died there by the tardigrade, and probably Mira Lorca would have just blown the ship up like he did anyways without ever investigating really what happened. He would have probably just nuked it from orbit just to be safe, and they would have just mothballed the entire concept of the spore drive, which is also why we've never heard of it. Again, with the sphere thing, if the Discovery wasn't there in the same way that it has played out, it wouldn't have been there to talk and interact with that sphere that was dying, and I think it would have essentially just passed on into, the cosmos and lost all of that history that we're now getting from the sphere. This is interesting to me. And the reason I bring up the other two things is I want to say that based off of the image that we now see of this, I don't want to call it the Red Angel anymore because it's clearly not an angel, this time-traveling being, this entity, this being, this person in a spacesuit, it looks like a mechanized spacesuit, is interfering with time. And the big crux of the argument between Tyler and Pike in the last episode was Section 31 thinks it's got some kind of agenda, and Pike seems to think the agenda is just righting some wrongs about the universe. I don't know if either one is right. I think the answer is going to be much more blurred than that. I think it's going to be something a bit different. I also think that the reason that the Discovery has been left in place next to this lightning storm in space for 1,000 years or probably even more has to do with the time-traveling being itself. I don't know if the time-traveling being is a physical manifestation of the USS Discovery, and the AI essentially creates a body for itself and then goes along and tries to essentially fulfill a role of this time-traveling being. I don't know if it is Michael Burnham, and perhaps it's like some kind of time loop where she has constantly going back to save herself, and then perhaps at the end of the Discovery show's run, they're going to have it so that Michael Burnham doesn't continue on with that loop, and essentially she gets erased from existence, and the timeline resets itself back into OG Trek. So I don't really know if that's going to play out that way, or if this being has a separate agenda. It's a separate being and has a separate agenda and needs Michael Burnham to do something rather specific. And Michael Burnham learns of this, and maybe it involves breaking the Prime Directive too badly, or hurting a lot of people, or winning some kind of temporal Cold War Part 2, or something like that. And she decides to reject that and essentially, again, remove herself from being saved all the way back on Vulcan when she was a kid, and removing her from the timeline as well, again, setting everything back into OG Trek. This, to me, does tie into also some comments that Kurtzman and company have said leading up into Season 2, which is that they said they were going to start to explain a lot of the visuals and inconsistencies and canon and inconsistencies from Discovery to OG Star Trek. And the fact that this being, who is dressed in a time travel mechanized suit, is bouncing all around time and doing different things, could have altered time by saving Michael Burnham, I think might explain why everything is a little bit different. So if she decides to remove herself from that scenario and essentially sacrifice herself for the good of the universe, and then she gets erased from the timeline period and dies as a child, it would explain why events that we know of from Trek, both alpha and beta canon sources, would unfold the way that they did previously. And maybe that explains why this show feels and is going about things so differently. In some regard, it doesn't affect the visuals, it doesn't affect the technology, it doesn't affect the holographic stuff, but like the big thing of Season 1 was this huge Klingon war, and then having Chancellor L'Rell in charge of the Klingon Empire. This was things that was never discussed before in Star Trek. Not to say that it couldn't happen, that we just didn't know about it, but that was a big pet peeve a lot of people had, and essentially that whole plot line would get erased if Michael were to sacrifice herself and then essentially reset the timeline. And kill this red being at the same time. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and again, I feel like there is some threads that connect, some things that don't. I think the biggest open question right now is I don't really care so much about who is this time-traveling person, but this Red Angel, but what is their agenda? I feel like is a very interesting point to bring up and to try to understand. Because we're basically shooting in the dark at this point as to what they're trying to do. And like I said, I think it's going to go kind of down the middle and not just be a good person, but not just be a bad person, but maybe somebody who's just doing something that they view as best for the universe, perhaps in 1,000 years. And that may also imply why the Discovery is left alone for so long, maybe leaving the Discovery in a location to get access back to later on in the timeline. Is also part of this particular Red Angel time travel being's ultimate plan. Whatever the hell that is, I don't know. So again, there's several ideas. I know I just hit you with a lot. That's a lot of crazy concepts I just threw you out at. Let's recap all that. We have the preserver technology that was being utilized by the Ba'ul that we suspect was probably preserver technology. Then we have the episode of Calypso that takes place 1,000 years in the future, in the year 3300 something. That involves the Discovery being left alone without its crew for an extended period of time for an unknown reason. And we have this theory that the Red Angel is already manipulating time for a very specific purpose that involves heavily Michael Burnham and involves saving her life and changing events and timeline because she's alive to do something. And we don't know what that something is yet. So yeah, that's it. These are different things that are kind of going on. These are kind of the up in the air concepts that are happening. I'm curious to hear what all of you think about these theories. I don't necessarily disagree with some of them. I don't necessarily agree with any of them. It's just interesting things that are going on. Like, I do feel as though the Calypso short trek is going to be tied back into something to do with this Red Angel, this time travel being, but we just don't know what it is yet. I do think that the fact that Spock was told about where Michael Burnham was by the Red Angel and to save, and that led to her being saved and living on her life in Starfleet. I think that was intentional on the writer's part. I think that they're trying to set something up to show that this being has been affecting time for quite a long time, actually. So yeah, that's it. Throw your pure ideas down below. Tell me what you're thinking. I'm very excited to see what they're doing here. I don't want to speculate too much. I don't want to keep making a lot of speculation videos because I feel like we could all collectively come up with whatever idea they're going to do. We could all collectively come up with something probably better than what we're going to get. I think that's just the nature of it. We're able to sit around and just theorize about one specific point of the story while they're trying to craft season-long arcs, and they get distracted by all sorts of different issues with production of a show. So I don't want to do too much speculating videos, but I wanted to get the conversation rolling, that there's things out there right now happening in Discovery that don't have answers, that could potentially be really interesting plots and really interesting stories. So throw up your ideas down below. Let's get the conversation rolling. And I appreciate all of you guys and gals checking out this video and being supporters of this channel. We recently did hit the big 10K mark. So I thank all of you who have subscribed to the channel, who have been here since the beginning. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, and I appreciate all of your undying support and all of your undying criticism. I take it all, and I appreciate all of it. I will catch all of you guys and gals next time. Live long and prosper, my Trekkies.